Marshalsay, talking to us all about traditional harping, her journey into traditional harping, different types of harps, different types of approaches, wire string harps, sheet music you can buy to get involved in, and her recent and upcoming projects. It's a really lovely podcast getting to know her journey and a little bit more about her. So I hope you enjoy it, and happy poppy harping. Hello, Karen! It's so lovely to have you on the Poppy Harp Inspire podcast.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here talking to you.
It's been so lovely keeping up with all of the amazing things you've been doing over the summer. So we've got so much to talk about. But we've literally, for people that haven't met you before, could you give us a little bit of a background about your harping?
The Whistle Stop Tour. I'm from Scotland. You can tell from the accent. I'll try not to speak too fast. I was a student. I was actually doing a PhD at the time in a completely different subject. And I'd played things like I was a flute. I'd done flute, and I'd started learning bagpipes and sang with Gaelic choirs and used to do Highland dancing and all the things little girls did in Scotland. And I don't really know exactly where the idea came from, except I suppose I was involved with Gaelic music and Gaelic culture, so the harp or the Clàrsach was fairly prominent in that. I wanted to try it, and I also knew that I couldn't let myself do it until I finished my PhD.
What's your PhD in?
It was in the attempts to found a Scottish National Theatre and looking at sort of national identity in theatre. There was a group called the Scottish National Players, the SNP, the first lot, and they started a theatre in Glasgow. We're talking just prior and then immediately after the First World War. And theatre wasn't a big thing in Scotland. They did it all themselves. Remember, there was no funding, there was no grants. They used to do these camping tours around the Highlands and Islands to take theatre shows round. And they did all sorts, but they very much wanted it to be Scottish and to be recognisably Scottish. So it looks into, what is that? What is national identity? How can you portray it? Can you create a tradition if it's not been there, and all sorts of things?
Wow, that's amazing. I had no idea. I'm learning now too.
And I was also, by this point, I was doing work for the Gaelic Books Council, and we were going up to the Mod, which is the big sort of, it's a bit like the Eisteddfod, I suppose. It's a big sort of competitive week of mostly choirs on the Friday, and then lots of other music competitions during the week, Clàrsach being one of them. I was going up to that, doing an exhibition of the Gaelic books, and literally it just all fell into place. I handed in my PhD thesis on the Friday, and Mary and I drove up in the van with all the books to Dingwall, to the Mod on the Sunday, set up an exhibition, and here was a poster for a Clàrsach exhibition, an exhibition of harp makers. And there was a come and try session with Judith Peacock. So this must have been sort of early 90s. And so on the Monday I went along and I went round all the harp makers and I booked into this come and try session with Judith Peacock. But I came away so disillusioned because harps were just so expensive and they were way out with my budget. I remember I had £300 saved, and this was my sort of first job after being a student. And I sort of thought, that's a lot of money. That's a huge amount of money. That's more than my monthly rent at that point in time. Surely I can get a harp. Well, of course you couldn't get a harp, and you couldn't hire a harp if you were an adult and all this sort of stuff. Things have changed an awful lot, thankfully. And there was this amazing American woman who she loved the Gaelic books. She didn't speak Gaelic or anything, but she would come and buy the Christmas cards and things. And she saw me by about the end of the week, because I'd had my come and try with Judith Peacock and absolutely loved it. We learned to play Ali Bali and things like that, and it was fantastic. And I thought, yeah, this is what I want to do. So she sort of met me in the corridor saying, oh, what's wrong? You're really sad. And I was like, well, I had this stupid idea. I was going to come here and get a harp and learn to play it, and that would be my next thing in life. And she was like, oh, that's terrible, and she just looked really deeply in my eyes and went, you need a harp now, I can tell. And I was like, okay. And then she said, I've got 3, I'll lend you one.
Oh, how lovely.
So that was just amazing. And she did, and it turned out she was living with Bill Taylor at the time. They were both working for Tim Hobra Harps. And so she said, come out to the house on the Thursday, because it was nearby, and you can have dinner and you can meet Bill and you can take the harp away. So I did. I turned up there, and it was just an amazing, all sorts of stories about that we probably shouldn't go into. And there was this little 17-string harp, one of Tim Hobra's, I think, little blondel harp. So down to middle C and maybe 1 string or something below it. And I had a little lesson with Bill, and there I went off with this harp, Sent
Oh,
her
wow.
a postcard. The next thing I was on Tyree. And I remember sending a postcard because I suddenly realised I hadn't even given her my phone number or address or anything. Just walked off with this woman's harp, you know. So that was how I started, and I just took to it straight away, to be honest. Absolutely loved it and just became very engrossed. The little harp was ideal because I was travelling a lot for the Gaelic book set. I was the field officer, so I would travel around different events or run exhibitions and things. So like I said, I was off to Tyree the next time. And I think also having learned, a young adult, but as an adult really, you have a different approach. And certainly when I'm teaching, I vividly remember the struggles of learning how to tune the instrument and all that stuff, you know. I remember a lesson, you know, when I was like, I don't understand what a chord is. What's a chord? How will I ever learn what a chord is? You know, I've come to it differently, but there was a lot of music in my life, mostly traditional music. I used to play it recorded a lot when I was a kid at school. Little things like my best pal who lived across the street from us, her dad was a piper. So he used to teach us tunes on the recorder, you know, because that was what we had. I would go to odd workshops. I got in an initial several lessons with Bill because, again, working for the Gaelic Books Council, you couldn't work on the Sabbath. If I was doing an exhibition anywhere on a Saturday night in the Highlands, I had to stay over somewhere, so I would pretty much stay. You know, Inverness is that sort of meeting point for all the roads, if you like. So I would go there, and then I would go out and spend time with Bill and Kathleen on the Sunday. And then I met Alison Kinnaird, who'd always been my harp hero, you know. And I started getting lessons from Alison, which were always sporadic. I wasn't a kid, so it wasn't like every week and this is what you do for next week and things. You would go and like soak up piles of information and tunes and different things, and then you would go away and work on it, and then you would come back and see her again. And I know Alison said to me at one point that within about 6 months, you know, she could tell that this was what I was going to do. And I kind of walked away from academia and all the other things I was doing, and I booked a round the world plane ticket, and I went off to Australia for a year with a little, by this point I had a little wire-strung harp, which I got from Tim Hobra. He had a workshop in Bewley, as I said, Bill and Kathleen worked for him, and I'd gone there with Bill. The harp makers were doing important harp makery things in the workshop, and I was sort of like, you know, it was kind of like looking after the toddler, really. Look, there's harps in that room, Karen, go and play with them. So I was playing, and there was this gorgeous little wire-strung harp, a little 19-string wire-strung harp. Now, having Bill and Kathleen and Tim Hobra as my initial sort of way into the harp world, it was great because I initially was exposed to all these different instruments. You know, Bill had cross-strung harps, he had double-strung harps, he had wire harps, he had all shapes and sizes of harps. They weren't exotic or weird and wonderful or they weren't in the harp zoo, do you know what I mean? To me, they were just, all these harps were normal. I loved the sound of the wire harp, but again, had absolutely no money to actually get one in Fine, and I went back down to Glasgow. I was doing bits and pieces of a research project, so I remember being in the special collections, and I got this letter, because it's the days before mobile phones and emails and computers and all these things, and we actually used to write to each other. And I got this beautiful letter from Tim saying, well, I have a proposal. He had harps in Biggers, the music shop in Sauchiehall Street, but the piano tuner wouldn't tune them. So of course the harps were incredibly out of tune. Nobody was interested or nobody was buying them. So Tim said, look, if you could go in maybe once or twice a week between now and Christmas and tune up these harps and play them a little bit, I'll give you that little wire-strung harp. And I said, yes, that would be amazing. So true to his word, this great big box appeared the following week with this little wire-strung harp in it, and I took it off around the world for a year. And by the time I came back, I was pretty much a harp player.
That's amazing. So I can see where all the traditional and the sort of avoiding the word historical, but the traditional and the Gaelic side has come from, because you're very much known as that kind of a player. So what's the big difference between early music wire harping and trad wire harping?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually, because one of the things is I think an awful lot of people think wire harp is an early music thing, you know, and it's in the early music box. And I can see how that's arisen, because most of the players who are out and playing it publicly and performing on it are early musicians. You know, Bill Taylor and Andrew Lawrence King and all these people. So that's perfectly understandable. And the other interesting thing is there is a shared repertoire. You know, I play tunes from the Lute manuscripts. I play tunes that are still in the tradition, but are also known from the sources. You can go back to books from the 18th century or older even, and find some of the tunes that are still being played today. And I think it's the approach to the music. As a traditional musician, I'm just happen to play the harp, if that makes sense. So it's me, the traditional musician, trying to play the traditional music, and I'm trying to play what I'm hearing and have heard over the years from others, because the harp is a broken tradition in Scotland. And that's something that we need to be very aware of. It's a double-edged sword. It's incredibly exciting because it is a broken tradition and you don't have the establishment on your shoulder saying, but you have to do it this way because that's the way I was taught. You know, the piping world has that because it became very formalised. The harp and the pipes, if you go back in history, were sort of around at the same time, but the pipes were taken up by the army. So the pipes survived the sort of societal, upheavals of Jacobite risings and things like that. And although the harp had been an important sort of art instrument, quite a high art instrument, it relied on patronage. The Lord of the Isles and, MacLeod at Dunvegan and all the rest of it, when their power diminished and disappeared because everything had gone down to London, with like James VI, Jamie the Sax became James I with the Union of the Crowns in 1603. All of these things really affected music and still affects, there's a knock-on effect today because that patronage for the music left Scotland. The pipes were saved, if you like, because the army took them up, but of course the army then codified and solidified and it became very, very structured and it became very competitive with piping competitions and societies, the London Society and Highland Society and all these sort of things. Whereas the harp didn't. The harp basically died out and it sort of trickled on. And there are people like Alison Kinnaird and Keith Sanger, who sadly died recently, have done so much research. Things like the Tree of Strings, and Keith Sanger's done a lot of articles on wire-strung-harp.com if you're interested in, what happened and who played and when it disappeared and all that sort of thing. But it basically did disappear. So it was resurrected and it was a very conscious movement by Eadarainn Gaelach, the Highland Society that runs the mod, to resurrect it, and it was seen as something to accompany Gaelic song. And it was still seen as being a song accompaniment thing right up into the 1960s, when it was people like Alison Kinnaird who broke that mould and sort of said, but I want to play tunes on it, Fiddlers are playing tunes and the pipers are playing tunes. And so what you have to do is understand the traditional style and how the tunes are performed, and what is this whole ornamentation thing about, and how does that work, and all that sort of stuff. And you really only get that by listening, not particularly to harp players, listen to pipers and fiddlers and good singers as well, And then it's quite exciting because you get to try and emulate, how do I make my instrument sound traditional, and kind of, it's, the proof is that I want it to be accepted as a traditional sound by other, players, by pipers and fiddlers and singers and things. So, whereas I think a historical or an early music person is more interested in trying to find out how it was played then, rather than how to play it now in a traditional context. As an example, on my new album, I recorded a Jude Dundee, which is from the Skene lute manuscript. And so it was written down by lute players. And my performance of it possibly horrifies early musicians, because they tend to take things as sacrosanct if it's been written down. And maybe this is just my experience of them, because I'm not part of the early music world, never really have been. Whereas to me, that's just a guideline. You can't write everything down. And I still struggle with this when you're publishing music and things. It's like, you write it fairly straight because that's the easiest way to write it down. And then you put in all the dots and dashes when you play it. And I think that's just what people have always done. And these Luke manuscripts were people's personal aid memoirs, if you like. They were their personal notebook. They weren't going to be published to all the harp players or all the lute players in Europe at that point in time. So it was their own memory aid. And quite often myself, I just maybe jot down first 3 or 4 bars of a tune just to remind me of it. And that gets me going. And I won't bother putting in rhythm other than really obvious things, because you remember the rhythm once you get the first few notes. So my approach is the same way. So it's the same. I did Adieu Dundee and I did To Dance About Belia's Dub. And if you look at my performance with the actual score, if you like, if you want to kind of use those terms, I've put an awful lot of rhythm and feeling into it. For me, it just happens naturally as I'm playing it, and that would be my first start. I would work on a tune and I would just keep playing it over and over and I'd see what arises. And in Adieu Dundee in particular, there's one place, there's a lovely little variation, which I love on the harps. I think tunes and variations are just such a great fun thing to do on a harp, and they're very harp friendly. You get this dee 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 da 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 dee, and then it does it again, but it moves down slightly, so you should be going from the D to a C sharp. I don't have a C sharp tuned in. I'm on the bray harp, and there's no levers or anything. An early musician would fret that to get that sound, and I tried that, and it works. I can get the C sharp and I can fret it, but it sounds, to my ears, it sounds really weak. You've got a really strong tune up to this point. So I thought, well, how would I play that naturally? And I take the C sharp out, and I think I just go to the D to the A, da 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 da, instead of dee 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 dee. So it's a different approach. I don't feel that the score is sacrosanct at all.
I think that's really, and that's how traditional music would have been passed, and how it evolves. I was teaching a good few years ago. I was teaching a class now about traditional music, and we've just learned the butterfly or something. And I got them to change a note that they liked, and I recorded it. I put it out on socials, and I said, "Oh, look, this is what we did, and this is how we changed it." And the amount of comments I got back saying, "You know that F shouldn't be there." Yeah, I know that shouldn't be there, but that was the point. But it was a really nice experience for them, but also quite eye-opening for me. The modern parallel maybe is pop music and lead sheets, and how you move off a lead sheet, and do you want it to sound exactly how the pop sounded, or will your arrangement be a little bit more harpy, or you've got some trad stuff that you've zhuzhed up on your new album. Can you tell us a bit more about your album? Because that's only just come out. Have you got one there?
Just come out. Where, I must have one somewhere. Look at this. I am so happy with this album, actually, and it's been my year's project up to this point. I started in the middle of January. We moved house last November, so everything was a little bit, I'll give myself to Christmas. And then I thought, right, I'm going to start in the middle of January, and it's my second album. So when I went to do it, my first thought was, because I do a lot of solo performances, and I do generally, it's like 45 minutes solo, and it's on all 3 Scottish harps and things. So that's a lot of material that I've been doing for the past sort of 6 years since my first album came out. My first thought was, I'll just go into the studio early in the year and just record a lot of the stuff that's not on the first album. And in the middle of January, I started kind of looking at what that would be, and I thought, you know what, I've played this stuff for 6 years. I don't want to spend the next couple of years doing it. I want to find mostly new material. So that was great. And I then got to spend, I gave myself, I think, like 6 weeks or something just to sort of find new material for the album. I was very, very fortunate, and I'm very grateful, because Creative Scotland gave me funding to actually record the album, which was fantastic. And that meant I could ask my heroes, if you like, and people that I've worked with a long time, like Alison Kinnaird, for example. We do a bray harp duet on the 2 bray harps, because that was something that, one bray harp sort of sends shivers down your spine, and it's sort of as, what's the word? Not quite demonic, but it's as rambunctious or whatever as a harp can be, just about. It's got a very different sound, and 2 of them together playing a nice, really rhythmic tune. I thought, yeah, that's what I want. And Alan MacDonald is someone who I've admired for a long, long time, and we've worked together on and off over about 20 years or something now. Alan comes from a renowned piping family, the MacDonald brothers of Glenuig, and lovely singer, Gaelic singer, very, very knowledgeable person about the songs and the tunes and the culture and the history and everything. So we'd been talking about doing various things, and I phoned him up and said, Alan, you know, now's the time, let's get together and do this and record it. So for that, for example, I chose Ivanor, which is Cave of Gold, and there's lots of little fragments of Gaelic songs, and then there's a more well-known one. And the first thing Alan said was, oh, well, which one are we going to do? And I said, well, we started chatting about it. And of course, at the end of the telephone conversation, we decided we would do them all. So we've run together this big, long, sort of 5-minute set, going through the different fragments, linking them together. Alan sings as he plays small pipes, which is lovely. And it really connects the language, the song, to the tune, which is a big thing in the culture and in the tradition. And Alan's very much the person that's brought that back to the fore in piping. And when you're learning stuff with Alan, you mostly learn it by sitting singing it, because he's sitting singing it on the kitchen table with his pipe, so you sing it along with him. So he was just looking at me, and he was down in the studio and went, I think you should sing this with me. And I'm like, oh, I'm not singing, Alan, no, I'll just play the harp. No. So we did. So it has my recorded debut as a singer on the album as well. So that's something new.
Wow, that's big and brave.
It was very big and brave. I think part of the thing was, because the other guests are Cathal McConnell, who's iconic. You know, Cathal's 81, 82 now, something like that. And he was one of the founders, along with Robin Morton, who was Alison's late husband. They founded Boys of the Loch, so that was one of the first sort of trad bands to come out of Ireland. And Cathal is just an absolute fund of tunes and songs and stories and variations, and he'll always tell, you know, who did I get this tune from. There's always a kind of a lineage, a provenance, if you like, with it, and you'll hear about it. And with Catherine on fiddle and viola, the three of us have been working as the Cathal McConnell trio for a few years now. So spoke to Cathal, and Cathal was great, because especially in this tune finding area, because he's always phoning you up and suggesting, oh, do you know this tune? You know, and he'll probably just bring out his whistle and play it to you over the phone, you know. So he suggested, like, the tune that came out as Uncle Hugh's Lullaby, that I've actually layered all the 4 harps on top of. That was a Cathal suggestion. He had an old recording that he'd made of John McManus, the fiddler, just getting tunes, because Cathal doesn't read music at all. And the phrase he uses is, I'll give you a tune. I'd like to give you this tune, you know, which means he's going to play it to you and you have to learn it. Or nowadays it's like, get your phone out and press that button and record it. So he gave me a recording of that, and he's absolutely right, it sounds fantastic on harp. And he also pointed me the direction of Planxty number 12, which is on the album, which he heard from an album called The Legacy of Stephen Greer, and that's a collection of manuscripts in the Irish Traditional Music Archive, which is an amazing resource. Everyone should go and check that one out. And they reckon that this tune is a previously unknown tune by Carolyn, because everything else in that book is by Carolyn. And this one just said Planxty number 12. And up to me, the powers that be, the researchers, the academics, you know, I'm just hanging on their coattails again, but it sounds like it. It's very much sits like it could be. So I'd chosen those things, and I got Cathal to sing the Valley of Knockanure, an absolutely beautiful melody, and it's such a kind of tragic song, and I remember my gran talking about those sort of events and everything, so I wanted that on. And a lot of it's just favourite tunes that I found. Sometimes you go deliberately digging. I wanted to see what was in the lute manuscripts that I could use. I had a vague memory of hearing Rob McKillop, the lute player, play a Jude Dundee, so that was already in my mind. And then of course there's my own tunes as well, because I'm a traditional musician, and part of being a traditional musician, most every trad muso that I know writes tunes. It's part of what you do, you add to the tradition and you pass it on. Where would I record it? That was the big question. And Gran's house with Angus Lyon, I just thought that's absolutely the place to go. It's on a farm in the Borders. I used to live nearby, actually, in Symington, and I remember Angus when he was a sort of 17-year-old local accordionist. Listen to what he's and it was literally his grand's house on the farm. So it was his grand's bungalow that when she died, they converted it into a recording studio. So there's a bedroom and there's a kitchen, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to go down there. So I just went down myself. I booked in Angus to produce for me, an engineer for me, and I just took all the harps down there and stayed for about 4 days for the first time, and then came back, got loads of tracks done, and had about 10 days in between, and then I went back down again for another 3 days to sort of finish it off. But that experience of being somewhere else, you know, in the countryside, just lovely place to go for walks in the evening. You're very, very focused. You're in this little house on your own when Angus went home at 5 o'clock at night and things. And I thoroughly recommend it. I think that sort of intensive residential recording is a really good
Yeah, that's
good thing
amazing
to
because
do.
usually you get an hour or 2 hours and it's this really intense,
Yeah,
panicky experience. You've got to be in and tuned during the same time. That sounds beautiful. What a lovely way to do it.
it was great, and it meant the harps were there, you know, for like 4 or 5 days or 3 or 4 days. So the harps came in the day before, all set up and tuned. They lived in that studio for the whole, all of the recording days. So yeah, it made it very relaxed actually.
And you said you recorded a load of your own works. Are they works that you've released, or are they works that they're still secret squirrel yours? They might be released in the future as sheet music, because I know you've got a lot of sheet
That's
music
a good
out.
question. Some of them already exist. Like, for example, like the first track is Planksdale Chulbiak and the Yule Log Polka. Now, the Yule Log Polka is actually on my Christmas book that I put out at Harper's Yuletide several years back. What else is there? La Ua Aristotle's Welcome to Clonstone. They're in the book that came out in April. And the Zoomfire's Reel and J.S. Kennedy from Stranraer. I think the Zoomfire's Reel is in a Harper's Favourites that came out a couple of years ago. J.S. Kennedy from Stranraer, I put in a Clàrsach Society folio. I think it's called the Dynamic Harper or something.
You've got a book with the Loch, the Lay, the Burn,
Oh
and
yes, this one.
love that one. I love that one. I think that's my favourite book.
Oh, thank you.
And then you've got another one that was being used on a lot of exam syllabuses, but it's got Andrew Smiles in it. And that
Oh
is a
yes.
song that just will not lose my head now. That is in there forever. And I must admit, I do a proper take your trad approach and I mess with it. And it's, I've tried it in so many different ways. And I love that tune. I think it was on a grade 7 syllabus, I think.
Okay.
What book's that one from? Is it called
It's in one of the Clàrsach collection ones. I can't remember off the top of my head which one because there are 3 kind
I
of
think it might be
volumes
in
of
the
it.
3 one.
Might be in the third one because they're sort of graded, you know.
Yeah, I've got the second and the third, so it won't be in the first because I've not nabbed that one yet. um, but you've got all these amazing books, and where can you, if somebody wants to play a little bit more of your music,
Mm-hmm.
you've got a good YouTube channel, don't you, where you play a few songs and you can listen to a few of them.
I do, and I mean that's the thing that's kind of probably the next thing that's on my mental to-do list because I'm not very good at, you're so much better at it. I'm so glad that you recorded all 4 pieces from this book to save me having to do it. So that
I
was
did that
brilliant.
actually. I did do that, yeah.
No, you did. It was amazing. Over the winter, I'm actually going to sit down and record proper videos of a lot of my music, just so that people can hear it. Because I do totally understand that, you know, you look at a book of music and it's like, yeah, okay, but what does all that sound like, you know, or what does it even look like? Does it look like it's an easy piece to play or a harder piece to play? I think one of my issues, problems, I'm not quite sure what the word challenge is, maybe that's a better word, is that as a traditional musician, and maybe this also harks back to that first question about the difference between an early musician, a historical musician, a trad musician. I don't play set arrangements of things myself as a trad musician. I play tunes, not arrangements. And it's a big, big mindset difference, you know. We're talking small changes. I always remember it's in the front of Alison Kinnaird, a small harp tutor, and was it Joseph Eloise made a kind of comment about it. But the gist of it is that it's like miniature watercolor painting traditional music rather than great big, you know, oils or something. And it's always very small changes, but I'll never really play, I don't have set arrangements, so you're not really playing a tune the same way twice, ever, you know. And I can play you a piece and then someone says, oh, could you play that again? I'll play the tune again, but I won't be able to play what I played exactly with my left hand or exactly where I put the grace notes in, because that will change naturally. And it's not huge changes. If I'm on a G chord, I'm going to play a G chord. I might play a single G note, I might do octaves, I might do it as a chord, I might do something else. So because I don't play set arrangements, so what's in my books are like snapshots. That was the way I played it the day I sat down to write it. But even then it takes me quite a long time to do it, because you suddenly have all these choices. And early on, I think I used to probably put too much into my arrangements, because it was like a compilation of all your best bits. Oh, I like this bit here and this bit there. And then you come back to it several, 10 years later or something, and you play it, oh, that's a bit too busy, isn't it? And I found when I was doing my Patreon during lockdown, actually my cheat that I learned to do was I would record me playing it first, and then I would transcribe the video.
That's a great idea.
It made my life so much easier. So I think, whenever I publish books in the future, I'll record myself playing it first and then transcribe it off. Being able to read fluently at proper speed and feel without being glued to the music all the time, and then the video looks really stilted because I'm always doing this, it is not really what I do. Maybe I'm over conscious of it, but I sometimes feel that the videos that I make, if I am just trying to play exactly what's in the book, don't really represent the way I would really play it, because they look a little bit more stilted. So maybe I just need to get someone like you to video them all for me, Fran.
I'll happily play through all of your music. I'll happily do that. Oh, so what have you got coming up? We're on the run up to Christmas now, really, aren't we? So October, November.
Really, are we?
What are you looking forward to? What's coming up?
Well, the first thing that's coming up that I'm really looking forward to is doing a live session with Pibroch Trelawney on air for BBC Radio 3's In Tune. That's at the end of September, so it'll probably be available, I think it's the 26th of September, so I think that'll be available certainly through the first couple of weeks in October on BBC Sounds, and I'm really looking forward to that. I always feel the winter is kind of a pulling in and sort of nestling and developing new things. Obviously, I want to be out gigging the album, and I've got various, I don't have a kind of tour dates or anything all finalised, but I've got various things up my sleeve for that, because it has been a great summer doing all sorts of gigs all over, in Lichfield Festival and things like that. Do a few more gigs with the album over the next couple of months, and kind of start getting stuck into the next projects. It's that balance of keeping, gigging the album and keeping that going, but in a sense that project's made and done. Obviously I want to perform them because I still love the tunes. There'll be another book coming out probably over the winter. I haven't totally decided, but I'm kind of thinking of doing a tunes from Edinburgh. I do like themes, if you know what I mean, like a context thing that's going on. So like I did the Christmas book, and then it was just all my favourites, and the Hagstone is all tunes that I've written. So yeah, I'm kind of thinking of that, but then I've also just moved over to Fife, and I've got a couple of wee projects that are more locally, from tunes from the local area perhaps, and all sorts of things. But videos is definitely going to be in there as well. I need to get on that one.
If people want to come and hear you play on your website, can they look up all of your upcoming concerts and things like that?
Absolutely. The website's the place to go for everything, really. There's upcoming concerts, there's dates, both for solo and I play with a band called the Whistlebinkies, which are great fun because they've been going for over 50 years now, and I just joined 3 years ago. So I've not quite done the full 50. So that and any kind of teaching dates or anything will be up on the date site. But there's a couple of pages with articles and lots of photographs from the making of the album and stories of the tunes from the album. And I do have a little bit of free sheet music up there, and I'm needing to kind of revamp that a little bit and maybe refresh that. It's been up there for quite a while, so I'll have a look at that over the next couple of weeks. And yeah, and then there's links to my shop where you can look at the books and the CDs and stuff like that.
Thank you so much for taking so much time to come and talk to all of my lovely Poppy Harpers. I've learned so much more about you.
Woo!
Brilliant! I didn't know about the PhD and all of that, and wire-string and trad and historical harping. So that's been amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your time. Good luck with all of your new projects.
Thank you so much. Yeah, no, I mean, I love sharing because I think that the harp world has a tendency to put things in boxes, and like I was down in Cheshire teaching a class with Lauren Scott's Cheshire Ensemble. And she said, well, can you do like a deep dive into ornamentation? So I did, because obviously that's my big thing. I absolutely love ornamentation. And it was interesting because when I've taught workshops like that in the past, people kept saying, oh, but they're wire techniques, aren't they? And nobody said that this time. So I'm kind of feeling quite optimistic that the word is kind of getting out there amongst harp players that, yes, some of these techniques started as wire techniques, but if it works and it gives you the sound you want, you can use it and play it on any harp. So
I used to get that with damping, and
yeah.
that damping is really good. I know it's used on a wire harp. It's really good. You can use it in Debussy. It makes it sound beautiful.
All harps ring, you know, some just ring louder than others or longer than others. So harps all do kind of operate roughly in the same way. And if you can take them from one to another, you know, I mean, I learned a lot. I spent 14 years playing for afternoon tea in the Balmoral Hotel on a pedal harp. I've never had a pedal harp lesson in my life. I've never had a private rehearsal time. Everything has been in public, you know, which has been some interesting moments. And I learned how to do pedal slides by accident, for example, you know. But that was great because you could just go for it and experiment with it. And so then I discovered, for example, why playing Scottish tunes the way I play them on my lever harp doesn't sound good in a pedal harp. So I then had to explore, how do I make them sound acceptable to me, to my ear as a trad player, but make them sound good on a pedal harp? And you know, you have to play a lot more notes basically. So yeah, just experiment.
Well, that's the lovely thing, is experiment and find out what you like the sound of. You're playing, so it doesn't matter what everybody else likes the sound of, as long as you're happy with your playing. That's what matters, isn't it?
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much for your time, and hopefully you'll come back in the future and we can have another chat about, I'm sure, your new projects that will loads of new
by
projects.
then.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.